Yeah.
Lovely. Okay.
Sorry.
Perfect. Don't worry. Let me see. I'll start with Catherine, and then maybe we go to Susan, Carol, and Karen. So Catherine, go for it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniela. Hi, everybody. I am, since the 1st of August this year, now Professor Catherine Easton, and I am the head of school here at Lancaster University Law School. So within that, I have 60 full-time academic colleagues that I lead and around 7 professional services staff as well. What do I enjoy about my role work? I mean, I strangely really enjoy it. I enjoy the people I work with. I enjoy making decisions, solving problems, and then also just understanding that it's important to sort of help people on their journeys in many, many different ways. And I'm absolutely adoring the strategic elements as well. What do I enjoy doing outside of work? I'm renowned for having quite a lot, potentially too many hobbies. So I'm a swing dancer, I'm a Lindy hopper, a bird watcher, and probably do about 2 or 3 pub quizzes a week. So yeah, that's kind of my life, really. Great to meet you all.
That's lovely, Catherine. Thank you so much for that introduction. Susan, let's go to you.
Thanks very much, Daniela. Really lovely to be here with you all today. My name is Susan James Relly. I'm Professor of Vocational Education in the Department of Education at University of Oxford. I'm Director of the Scope Research Centre, Skills, Knowledge and Organisational Performance. And one of the other roles that I have is Associate Head of the Division. The University of Oxford is broken up into 4 divisions. And so I'm Associate Head in the Social Sciences, responsible for education, anything to do with teaching, learning and assessment across our 14 different schools, faculties and departments. And until the end of September, I was Deputy Director of the department, but I have stood down from that role and I will be stepping down from Associate Head in the lead up to moving to Australia. I've actually resigned from University of Oxford last month and I take up Head of School of Education at the University of Adelaide in early January. What do I like about my roles? I like the strategic element, the forward planning. I like problem solving. I like helping people to solve problems and get the best possible outcome. I like being in a position where I can give voice to those colleagues who feel that they don't have a voice or can't speak their voice. I think that's really important, particularly in academia and for women in academia. What do I do outside? I have a 5-year-old. I don't do much outside of work except run around after him. I do, up until recently, I was doing upholstery, learning how to reupholster antique furniture. And prior to the pandemic and starting to do it more now, having friends over for food, cooking lots and lots of food. That's what I like to do.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Susan. That's lovely. Let's go to Carol. Carol, are you okay to go next?
Hello, I'm Carol Hill, Professor of Health and Social Policy at the University of Glasgow. I've been with the university for more than 25 years and worked on its satellite campus in Dumfries for over 20 years. The last 8, I've been Director of the campus and Head of the School of Interdisciplinary Studies there. What do I like about my job? Well, I certainly like the challenge. I like the strategic elements, and I think I enjoy, shall we say, having the power to make things happen for my colleagues, which is something we really get an opportunity to do in this particular role. And what do I do outside of it? Not a lot, to be honest. Sleep a lot. I do a lot of sport and walking the dog, and my family have grown up, but I have some step-grandchildren that I spend a lot of time with too.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Carol. And Karen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Pleased to meet you. I'm Karen Birch. I'm a Professor of Exercise Science, and I work at the University of Leeds alongside Natty and Liz here today. I am an Executive Dean of the Faculty of Biological Sciences, so I lead a faculty that has 2,000 students and about 400 staff. Not all of those answer directly to me, obviously. About 200 of those answer upwards to me. So it's a big faculty in a large university, and it's great fun. So that's one of the things that I like about my job. I mean, there are many challenges, many challenges, as we are all facing in higher education at the moment. But being part of that, being able to challenge and face into those challenges, and also represent the staff in the faculty, because when you're a dean, you look upwards to the university and you look downwards as well. So you're representing both sides. And I love that challenge. And I love the mentoring and development side of working with people and helping people to get to leadership positions that will enhance their careers. So those are the sorts of things that I like to be involved in. Outside of work, I'm a parent. I have a teenager, which is just as you will. If you've got a teenager, is a nightmare. So you spend a lot of time trying to corral where your teenager is. Are they in? Are they out? I like musical theatre, and I do a reasonable amount of exercise. So that's me.
That's beautiful. And I think probably we can already notice, thinking about some of the introductions that we've had this morning, there's so much commonality in terms of the sort of things that you enjoy doing, the part about strategy, solving problems, empowering others, being there as a mentor and coach in supporting others. So it's fantastic already to hear about all of these commonalities. So what I thought we'd do now is we give our panel the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about their career journey. And maybe they can start with where they think their career journey kind of started off from. What were some of the most important decisions that they've taken along this journey? Where are they now, and where do they want to go next? And just because on my screen I have this very nice order, and Catherine, you are the first one. I hope you don't mind if I start with you. So perhaps in a few words, take a few minutes to tell us a little bit more about your career journey, your career narrative, where it started from, where you are now, and maybe where you're going next to. Is that okay, Catherine?
Of course it is. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. I'll definitely try to précis because this could last a long time. But so, I mean, what I say is quite specific potentially to law as a discipline. So obviously there are quite a lot of students on a law degree. And I started doing my PhD at Manchester Metropolitan University around 2001. I then took on a lot of GTA associate lecturer teaching in many across many different subjects as well, whilst doing my PhD, which then suffered, and that was delayed significantly because of the kind of vulnerable nature of that work. And it was one of those ones where I ended up doing so many hours that when a lectureship came up, it was better for them to give it to me than not, in terms of the experience I had teaching there. I then, and this is a point I've got to say, a female leader sat me down and said to me, if you want to develop, you've got to think of yourself here a bit and finish that PhD. And it's one of the best things anyone ever said to me. So she was really thinking about my future and how I was developing. I did finish the PhD and started to publish quite a lot from there. And within 2 years, I then left MMU to come to Lancaster as a kind of research intensive university. Now, again, I'll be quite honest, the way in which my career had progressed as a lectureship at MMU, I ended up taking a pay cut to come to Lancaster. But I will point out, so my senior female leader sitting me down and saying do the PhD was absolutely pivotal to me, but then also this move was as well. And at the time I wasn't sure how strategic it was, but it has done exactly what I wanted from my career. I saw myself moving into a more research intensive environment. So after 2 years at Lancaster, I was promoted to senior lecturer. And then after, let's have a think, I've been here 10 years exactly. So I feel it was after about sort of 4 or 5 years, I got a readership and then became professor literally about a month ago. In terms of the work I've done, I did a lot of administrative tasks here at Lancaster. And what I did was, and when I look back, it was to see where people were struggling and helping out. Now, I'd never say that the thing to do would be to always say yes, but be strategic with where you could be most useful and where you think your skills would lie. We then moved up. Now I did get the readership, and there was a need because we had grown so much and had a very centralized management system for help for the head. And there was a lot of things that kind of needed doing. And I ended up picking up things, and I then became deputy head around 5 years ago. And then when the outgoing head of school stepped down, I became head, and here goes, in November 2020, which is an interesting time for everybody. So I then had to deal with that first full term online. So so the outgoing head was promoted, promoted kind of at late notice upwards. And then from being a deputy head who was doing quite a lot of work but didn't have the executive responsibilities, all of a sudden I was the head within COVID times. The thing that's been so good for me is having a managerial structure that really works for me. And I've got to say thank you so much to my outgoing head, because he did set up 2 associate heads who support me so much. And again, I might talk a little bit later about having the right people for the role and their personalities, but I feel that without them, I couldn't actually function in this role with as much kind of influence as I now do. And I've got to say, I'm absolutely enjoying every minute of it. Well, not every minute, of course. I'm enjoying a lot of it. And the difficult decisions, but we'll talk about them later. So, right, that's a précis of me. So I'll stop there. There you go, summary.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Susan, is it okay if I go to you just because you're next on my screen?
Sure, no problem. I'll keep it short because we want to get to the questions. That's always the interesting bit. So I left Australia 24 years ago on a visa that Australians can get as part of the Commonwealth, 2-year working holiday visa. I was a secondary school teacher. I'd taught in Queensland and Western Australia for 2 and a bit years each. I was teaching in London and thought, what's my next move? I had applied to a few different universities, Oxford, Edinburgh, and a couple back home, and I got accepted into Oxford. So I came and did my master's. I managed to get funding for scholarship for fees. I stayed on, and then it was a postdoc in economics, and then back to education for a postdoc, and then that 1 year contract eventually extended to 2 years. And then senior research fellow contract, and then a deputy lecturer contract, departmental lecturer contract, all in the department. So bar those 2 years when I was a postdoc in economics, I've been in the education faculty here, so totaling 22 years. When I was departmental lecturer, I applied for associate professor as part of our recognition of distinction exercise. I took on various roles in the department, director of doctoral research, director of graduate studies. I applied for professor through recognition of distinction a couple of years ago and was successful there, and then applied for the associate head role. So stepping down as director of graduate studies to take on that role because of conflict of interest. And then the deputy director role came up, and it was always my dream, my goal to head back in Australia in a dean headship position. And so I took on the deputy director role to build up experience working with our previous director, who I admire hugely, and then our current director, who's been great to work with the last 9 months, but not as long as I would have liked. I think I probably have a lot to learn from her, but opportunities came up, and I think that's the key thing, is when opportunities have come up, I've taken them, most rightly, some wrongly, and we can get into that. But one of the key things was having a really good female mentor as a sounding board to run off ideas, and I didn't always take her advice, and they're possibly the roles that I took on wrongly. But you know, I learned from them all. So that's me.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Susan. Carol, are you okay if you go next?
Yes, fine. Well, I was appointed to the role of Director of the University of Glasgow's Dumfries campus and Head of the School of Interdisciplinary Studies back in 2014. And I'm quite proud to say I'm the first female in that role, and so far the longest serving in that role. But academia wasn't my first career. I defied all expectations as a 16-year-old and failed all of my O-levels. So there was no chance, no second chances for me, not in our family. And I had to go out to work at 16. I'd spent a couple of years faffing around before I settled with the Zurich Insurance Company. And there I became the first female head of claims department in the UK headquarters. And during that time, I began testing the water to see whether I did actually have a brain in here, having failed all those O-levels. And I did some O-levels and A-levels, and eventually I became a prize-winning student, undergraduate student, and did my PhD. I think in the months after that, one of the things that stands out, particularly at the end of my PhD when I was considering an academic career, was when I asked my then supervisor and head of school whether he thought I might have a career in academia. I remember his reply to this day. He said to me, "A woman of your age with children? Come on." And I thought, well, thank you for that, you know, and I really was very unhappy about that. I survived the next couple of years on short-term contracts, went through that rite of passage that we seem all to have to go through. And they were hard years, but I was in the system, and I eventually took a chance and accepted the post of lecturer at Dumfries campus, University of Glasgow's Dumfries campus. It was a bit of a gamble. I was offered a post in Glasgow at the same time, but I was tired of travelling and I was drawn to the opportunity to help set up a brand new campus in Dumfries. And I've never regretted that decision in the 22 years I've been there. We began with a blank sheet, no lecturers, no courses, no students, no anything. But we did have an inspirational leader who was committed to giving us opportunities and to giving us credit for the things that we did. Totally disorganized, but we always got credit for what we did. And one of the interesting things for me about that time was that because we were a new campus and a satellite campus, we got used to sitting around the table with the principal, the vice principal, and various people of that stature. And when I reflect back, I became used to taking decisions well above my pay grade. And it's interesting that at that time, I saw that as a privilege, whereas now I might kind of think, you pay me what I'm worth. So it's quite interesting when you look back how those things transpire. I moved on at a reasonable pace, lecturer A, lecturer B, senior lecturer, professor, and took on head of research centres and various roles like that. When in 2010 the university merged its schools, its departments into schools, we became part of the College of Social Sciences. I became head of school at my second attempt, and again reflecting back, and I'm long enough in the tooth now, I think, to be able to do that. It was interesting that the vision I offered at my first interview was rejected in favour of an external candidate, male, professorial. I think that was probably not the best decision, and I realised when I actually took on the job that hadn't been the best decision. But you know, I had another go eventually, 2014. I never give up, and I think in the last decade we've made tremendous investments in the campus. Again, it's a part of my nature to keep pushing forward and to push through, and I think that the school I inherited back then is completely different to the school I now I'm part of. So that's been my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Carol. And let's go to Karen.
Thanks, Daniela. So I've done that classic journey from, you know, graduate post to a postgrad, to a postdoc, to a lecturer, to a senior lecturer, to a reader, to a professor. So that's been my journey. I started in Liverpool many years ago, I think about 100 years ago, and I've moved my way up through Manchester Metropolitan like Catherine, and then came across over to the University of Leeds. The journey there allowed me to take up lots of different positions. So when I don't mean leadership positions, I mean things like, you know, you're the course leader, or you're a year tutor, or you're a something else tutor. And all of those things have built up a resilience and a knowledge of how education works across the board, which have always stood me in good stead when you go for the leadership positions like head of school or dean, because you have that wide understanding. So that's one thing that I'm really glad I did. I left MMU to come to Leeds, having put in for a readership there, which the vice chancellor, female vice chancellor at the time, said was the best internal application she'd ever seen for a readership. So I thought, oh, I'm a shoo-in here. The external, a male external, told her that it wasn't, and I didn't get it. So I have to say I cried. I was quite disappointed, and I cried at that point. And I thought, right. And so from that point, I made a move, and like Catherine, took a demotion. I didn't take a pay cut, but I took a demotion because of the different scales when I moved from MMU over to Leeds. But then my journey at Leeds, with that resilience and that sort of, right, come on, I'm going to do this differently. I've then been director of research, I've been head of school, and I am now the dean of faculty, the first female dean of the Faculty of Biological Sciences. Things on the way, I've sat in many committees, and when I started all of those committees, lots of men, and we now see much more of a diversity and mix, which is brilliant. So the things that really have had an impact on me in terms of making decisions was that readership application. Also, having a child. When I came back, having had my son, I was determined to tell myself I'd ruined my career. I really struggled with it, that being a parent, you couldn't be an academic and do all of the things, which is of course absolute rubbish, but that's what was going on in my head. And it took me a while with some really good mentoring from other people to get over that, my own kick myself. You know, I can't do this. This isn't going to be possible. All people will think about now is that I'm a mother, not an academic. And I really struggled with that for a while. And I hold that in my mind when I talk to other people, males and females, but mainly females, who come back with that doubt as well, and talk to them and help them through. I also suffered bullying. So I was bullied by a female professor. And that had a big impact on me, not just because of the emotional content of being bullied, but the thing that happened there was making me think about why was she behaving in a way that you would, and I'm generalizing, that we see in a generalized masculine way. And I actually started talking to some male senior colleagues, so Vice Chancellor of the university at the time, Sir Alan Langlands, about what it was like to be a female on the boards, and what he perceived a female could bring to the board and to the head of school role and other senior roles. And the answer there was, we need authenticity. We need a female perspective. And that was from a man who really saw the benefits of having a female perspective in leadership position, doing things differently, looking at the world in a different way. And having seen this female prof, the way she behaved differently with me and very aggressively, I took a decision then to be authentic. And when I went for the role of dean, I think that held me in good stead. So that really took me to that position. The last thing I would say is that I didn't think I was going to get the dean role. You know, what we hear about promotions all of the time, especially with women, you know, shall I do it? Shall I not? What happens if I get told no? I just thought, right, I'm going to go for this, and I won't get it. I know I won't get it, but here I am, you know, prepared really well. Obviously, lots of belief in who I was and where I wanted to go with the faculty, and it was a competitive process. And that was the position I then ended up in, and that's the process I will go through if I move forward, thinking about the future of potentially, you know, deputy vice chancellors. That if you don't try, you don't get. But that authenticity for me has been the thing that I've taken with me through my later parts of my career. Thanks, Daniela.
Thank you, Karen. Some beautiful themes already that you've all shared in terms of your career journeys, you know, marked by loads of decisions, but also roadblocks and different identities and different responsibilities. So what I would like us to do, obviously we had a few questions that have come through the pre-evaluation questionnaire. I'll only start with one. And what I would like to do is that to invite everyone in this room here to actually ask their own questions if they would like to. You can put it in the chat, or actually just put your hand up to the reactions, and I'll know that you want to ask a question. As I said, feel free to do it in chat if you prefer that. In terms of our panelists, again, if there is a question that is directed to you, if you feel free to say yes or no. If you feel like, actually, I'm not quite sure how to respond, that's okay. We don't need to know it all, so that's fine. However, if it's a general question, maybe put your hand up so I know that I can go to you first. And I'll start with a question that was already added in the pre-evaluation questionnaire. Maybe a lighthearted question, one that can open up the discussion in terms of the leadership topic. So the question is this one: do you see yourself as a born leader, or is this a skill that you have developed? And if you have worked on developing it, what helped and who? So feel free to have a go at that question. Whoever wants to go first.
I think it's about confidence, developing confidence. So am I a born leader? I'm a born confident person. I've developed that over the years and brought that into my roles. But I think it's about having those experiences, working in groups and working with people and understanding how you communicate. because leadership at the end of the day is about sizing up opportunities, sizing up what's going on in a conversation with people, and then leading that in a different way. So I think, yes, you can develop it. I think it's about putting yourself in those positions and working your way through that with a mentor maybe, and coaching that will allow you to look at the way that you lead and the way that you discuss in any particular area in any particular meeting.
Great, thank you, Karen. Yes, Carol, go for it.
I would say both in answer to that question. I think I probably have innate leadership qualities, but they have developed from my experiences along the way. So I think you start with something in you that you want to go and lead, you want to take those roles, but you're reflective as you go through different experiences and develop your leadership capabilities.
Okay, thank you. Go for it, Catherine.
There we go. I might come back to that kind of difference between management and leadership. So as you might have been talking about earlier, in terms and how they both interact as well. So in terms of management, I feel that actually getting to grips as much as possible as I can with actually what's happening across the department, and then also being really present for when there might be an issue with colleagues. So actually being open to people coming and saying, I'm not really comfortable in this situation, or this is happening, and actually seeing that, the visibility there, which is management really, that's kind of daily management, then leads into the leadership skills and the trust that I then get from the department in order to make those strategic decisions. And actually, I see them both as being kind of symbiotic and very complementary as well. So then I'm giving much more freedom to stand there and say, is this what we want? Which way do we go? Because it's known that I have quite a very strong understanding of the department as well. Also, it's people. Putting the right people in the right roles then gives you much more flexibility to actually flex your own leadership style as well. In terms of whether it might be innate, I think it's mixed. Again, it's been a few things that potentially that I might have had qualities that have had to come out in certain situations, and then they have been developed further. So I think it's a bit of the mix like other people. Cheers.
Lovely question there. Is this what we want? And what a lovely leadership question that is, when you are put in that situation where you need to work with others in deciding the future of your department or your university. Lovely question there. Thank you. What about you, Susan? How does that question land with you?
Interesting question. I'm not sure I was a born leader. I was a born problem solver, and I think that leads to some form of leadership. As you solve various problems, people look to you to solve more and more. It's interesting in higher education, because if you think about it, that we don't get training in how to manage or lead. There are courses that you can go on in the private sector, and in the private sector they would pay for you to go and do an MBA and various things, and there's not those same opportunities in higher education. And so as Karen was saying, it's almost you learn by doing. You take on that next role according to your capacity, and then you learn more, and then you lead more, and you manage. And I think it becomes innate that you end up making decisions and leading in a way that allows others to have the trust to follow you. I really don't know if it is innate to begin with. Some of the best leaders, the people that I've watched, as associate head, when I'm watching the other heads of departments, and Martin Williams, our Pro VC, watching him operate, I don't think there's probably one or two that would have expected to be where they are, but I'm not sure that they would have felt that they were born to lead, that's where they quite wanted, because we often don't enter academia to do that. We enter academia to do our research and teach, and then these other roles kind of, I think for the most part, come along and we take them on, and then we go on a certain pathway.
Beautiful insight there, Susan. Thank you for that. I wonder what questions we might have from our participants, and whether anything has emerged. And whilst you are getting perhaps your thoughts ready, there is another question which actually ties in really nicely to something that Karen, you mentioned in your introduction, when you said about that looking up and looking down and having that ability to do both. And one of the questions that we've had along this was, how do you demonstrate value when you look upwards? And how do you get people to do what is needed when you look below, when you look down, when you know you need to bring people together? So how do you keep that balance?
It's a really good question, because it's hard. It's really hard because you have to balance what's in your heart and what's in your head, and the demands of your bosses as well. So, you know, there are strategies that a university will put in place from my example that potentially I might not necessarily agree with. However, it is the strategy that the university and our employer has placed out there. So it's about, the thing you have to do is you have to understand why. The first thing has to be about why. Why is it that that's on the table? What are the reasons? How can you explain that in depth, in detail, with data to support what you are doing? Then you have to look down and go and have those conversations. And I think what you have to accept, this shouldn't be the case, but it is the case, especially in academia, you have to accept you're going to get pushback. And you have to be able to personally absorb that. Now, hopefully you won't stand for anything that's outside of the values. So you're not going to take people shouting at you or being rude or anything like that. That is not what I mean. But you will get that education and intelligent pushback on why are we doing this? But it's about standing your ground and having the data to understand and pushing back in a nice way. You have to be able to motivate, to challenge back and explain. And you have to stay in that part of your personality that is not showing any frustration. The difficulty, of course, is if inside you're thinking, yes, I agree, but that's not the point here. You are in a leadership position, so you have to be able to give yourself that ammunition and stay in the moment and stay within your values to be able to explain that onwards. And I know, for instance, that, for example, Natty has done that many, many times in recent days.
What an important aspect to remember, especially when the going gets tough and you're there in the crunch to decide between what your heart tells you and what your mind tells you, what the university structure leads you to do and what you feel actually needs to be done. And that reminder to actually stay aligned to your values and really understand then how can I navigate the structure that I have in front of me, whilst I can stay aligned in my values. Any other views on this one?
Yeah, I suppose it's quite difficult when you have a head of school role, because you're trying to keep the school itself content and moving forward, while at the same time meeting the objectives that are set by the senior management within the university. So I always find that satisfying those above is not difficult. They don't mind how you do it. It's difficult, but they don't mind how you do it. So the way you do it with those below is to make sure that they see there is value in what you're doing for them, so that it's not just about some institutional objective. There is actually value for them and for their careers, and to get their buy-in, I think you have to be able to demonstrate that.
Beautifully put. Satisfying exactly about making sure that you can show value for them.
Which right. It's not just a top-down decision, but that by doing whatever it is, by meeting those targets or KPIs or whatever it might be, there is actually value for the individual and therefore for the school as a collective.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Carol.
So one of the things that I see is quite important, it's such brilliant answers in terms of communication. It's that information and explanation down the line. And I see myself in a very strong sort of advocate role looking upwards. So I obviously advocate for a school that's got so many students in a research intensive university and has its issues there in terms of resources, but then also just finding the points at which I potentially feel I can make change. So if I were to sit there in every meeting and say, look, we don't have the professional services staff, we actually need more staff, then that kind of record would get a little bit boring and people wouldn't listen. But just working out when I can actually have an influence going upwards. And also it is particularly political as well, talking to the right people, but then keeping within the framework and the managerial framework that's set from the top down. When I then take it into the department, again, exactly as was said earlier, it's all about the explanation, why we're doing this, saying to people, you know, we've got to be on board with this. And now I know this is being recorded, perhaps I shouldn't be so honest, but then looking at certain things and saying, do we really have to do that exactly as they've said? And kind of finding ways around doing things and potentially actually fulfilling what's coming down from above, and then communicating that back upwards as well as a decision that we've taken. So again, it's like managing the two ways, and then also, yeah, explaining to people exactly why we're taking those decisions. But I do tend to mitigate the impact quite a lot, because a lot of departments are different. So I can then say we're different here, so we're going to do it this way. It might not be exactly what's been said from above, but I think they'll buy it, being quite honest.
Great, thank you, Catherine. I don't know if Susan wants to add anything to that, or
yeah, all really good points. I mean, I think I think I primarily see my role as almost translational, as a translator between those above and my colleagues who I'm responsible for and need to nurture and bring along with me. You know, it's about being able to explain the top-down decisions, but then also being able to feed up how that affects us as a department, and keeping hold of your values, as Karen says, but at the same time, we all work in areas of grey, and can some translations be slightly bent? Can some rules be slightly morphed to actually take account as to what we are as a department? So I think sometimes, you know, in a very traditional university that I come from, that has such a strong collegiate focus, most of our focus tends to be on undergraduates, but we're a graduate only department, so not all policies are going to fit us. So it's about translating certain policies as to how they will fit. So I often find myself just sort of working out how best to translate across the up and the down.
Great, thank you, Susan. I have two people who put their hands up. The first one was Natalia, so we'll go to Natalia and then to Lina.
Yeah, thank you all. I wanted to ask you, you all seem to have overcome very difficult times in your careers, in your life, but you all seem very confident in the position you are at now. Do you still experience any type of imposter syndrome, or if you did in the past and now you have overcome that? Was there any key moment that really removed that you know, that cloud that tells you perhaps, oh, I don't deserve to be here, I don't deserve this position, I'm not well prepared, somebody else is better prepared, etc. Do you still experience that?
Yes, there we go. Do you still experience the imposter syndrome? Go for it, Susan.
Not anymore, but I totally get what you're saying. Sure, I mean, we all do. I would really like to question anyone who said they've never felt imposter syndrome, you know. But it's how we deal with it. And it was, for me, it was when my mentor said to me, I was having a chat with her, and she said, you've got to apply for X role. And I said, oh no, you know, I won't get it, blah, blah, blah. And she said, a man would never say that. A man would never say, at least out loud, I will never get that. And she said, so you don't know. You've got no idea who the panel are, what you're going to do, and you don't know whether other people are thinking that same thing. So you have to stop, because you're letting all of that stuff live rent-free in your head. And when she said that to me, I thought, oh yeah, bugger that. I'm not, you know, my brain's full enough as it is. I don't need, and it was a really defining moment of, you know, other people may or may not, but a man probably definitely would not be saying out loud, oh no, I can't get it. And she said, and the worst that can happen is you don't get it. You know, if you don't have a go, you'll never know. And it was just this really open conversation, quite quite a bit of swearing. But just a very honest conversation. She said, if you keep letting that imposter, that other person live rent-free in your head, you're never going to get where you want to be, ever. And so I stopped. She was right. And, I sneak back every so often, but.
Okay, thank you.
Very good point there, Susan. Anyone else on that?
I sometimes still feel it. We all do, as Susan says. It's in there. I think the thing that I do sometimes, I can be sitting in a university executive group, so it's quite high up, and think, what I'm about to say now, is it really the right thing to do? And I'll say it because I'm going to do it because I've made that decision, and I've been doing this a long time. And then of course, all of a sudden, it's what everybody wants to talk about because you know what you're talking about. So, but you've still got that little bit of doubt, but you put yourself in there, and at the back of your head, you know that you're in that position because you know your stuff. But yeah, it circulates. But I'm not sure that's a gender issue. I think some of my male colleagues also feel like that as well sometimes. It's probably more pertinent in the females, but you know what I mean. I do talk to the male deans, and they also will say, well, wasn't sure. So.
Great, perfect, thank you. If anyone else, or should I go to the next question? Okay, let's go to Lena in this case. Lena, I can see you have your hand up.
Hello, hi. So I have 3 questions, but I think I'll put 1 or 2 of them in the chat for it to be quicker. So I just wondered about, have you ever felt sort of like undermined by more, say, like senior colleagues, in particular, maybe more senior like male colleagues, and how you've dealt with that like throughout your career, just as someone who is, okay, I guess sort of maybe a younger-ish person in sort of leadership roles. I just wondered if there was any guidance around how to manage that space. And then the other 2 questions I think I'll put in the chat if that's okay.
Yes, Lena, thank you. And I think that also relates a bit to the question that Eva had about mansplaining. Go for it, Karen. I can see you put your hand up.
Yeah, I think what's really, really important, Lena, is that you always stay with your values. So if you push back and be aggressive in any way or sarcastic or anything like that, it will completely backfire on you. So you have to stay in that zone of, well, I find that really interesting because what you're actually saying to me is you're coming at it in a really in a high quality leadership perspective, so that you draw them into a conversation to draw out what they're saying to you, so that you can push back and answer in a really high quality way. Because what I've done in the past is gone sarcastic. Oh, so you say I don't know what I'm doing because I'm a woman, and that does not go down. It doesn't work. All you do is raise the hackles in the whole meeting or with that individual. I've always tried to just stay in that sort of that really polite position and just pull out what they're saying. So you're telling me I don't know that. Is there a reason that I wouldn't know that? To put them on the spot. And what I found is by just being really polite, it moves it on, and they stop doing it.
Thank you.
Great point, Karen. Catherine, yes.
I can really agree that. So it's kind of a killing with kindness type of thing, Karen, isn't it? Yeah. Being measured, being polite, not kind of showing the frustration so obviously as well. But then also, I think, Karen, you touched upon this, being fully informed. So actually, when they say to you, this isn't the right decision, you can point to a number of examples and reasons why it is. So again, that can then push back on these points. Now, as I've just said that, I do wonder whether we might be in a position where potentially as a female, you need to be more informed than you should. I've never really felt that as kind of different in the room, but I've never actually challenged that thought in my head until now. But I do end up doing a lot of reading of the documentation, getting sure the stats in my head. Stats and facts work really well when you're getting pushed back, but potentially we have to know them a little bit better than we should. And I've just come up with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say it's quite a long time since anybody's done that to me. And I think in the earlier part of my career, I dealt with it very much by being absolutely sure of my facts and my information, fully informed, as Catherine has said. and just letting the results demonstrate exactly what I was doing. I never bite on those occasions, you know, just keep a straight face and get on with the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps related to the role of a woman in terms of leading, or a female leader, there is a question where we can already see some answers. But do you think there are any weaknesses to women who lead?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear them.
Are there any weaknesses? What would be the biggest weaknesses when women lead?
Oh, I don't think there are weaknesses because women lead. There are weaknesses within individuals who lead, but I don't think that's because they're women at all.
Some of the best leaders I've seen are women. So I don't think it's a weakness when women lead. I think the weakness, like Carol was saying, comes where I've seen not so great leadership is when women try to be like men.
Yeah.
And we're not. Just, you know, we have empathy. We can have sympathy. And I think, you know, very similar to what Karen was saying, don't get involved in that game. It's not your game. You know, keep your own game, keep your own values, keep your own core and inner strength, and then you won't have weaknesses. I also think another weakness, but this isn't gendered, is people who have the inability to say sorry. Like, as a leader, if you make a mistake, own it, and then it's done. And people being able to see that you can recognize that you made the mistake, you've owned it, you've moved on, is huge in building trust. It's that follow-up, the you know, trying to bluff your way through it and not to say mea culpa, I'm sorry. You know, I think that is a big weakness. And that goes back to my first point, because I sometimes feel like women feel they can't acknowledge the mistake and say sorry because they see that as the sign of weakness. But I actually see that as a sign of strength in being able to acknowledge the mess up and move on and fix it. You know, that's the most important thing, is that the solution is found. I think the traits that we have, that empathy, the ability to empathize, that ability to understand people, is actually what gives us strength as leaders and makes women really good leaders.
And is needed in leadership as well. So that balance to the other side. And if we all remember that, that's how we should behave.
Yeah. Just don't be a man.
Yeah.
Catherine, what about you?
No, I couldn't agree more. I've kind of put a little bit about it in the chat as well. I've experienced some. I don't think there's any weaknesses at all, but there's challenges that can be posed by taking a very open, responsive approach to leadership, which I feel that I do potentially more than I have seen in other potential male leadership situations, because you're giving the information and you're opening yourself up for more criticism. But then I feel that is the strength, and it's the empowerment of others to enable them to question you that actually brings the strength in that leadership position. So again, I wouldn't frame that as a weakness at all. I'd turn it the other way. And I did feel like I was taking a bit of a risk at the beginning, because this was the biggest thing I'd ever done when I took over, you know, like in the middle of COVID. And I had a very different leadership style from my predecessor, but actually telling people what was coming down the line, being open, having the open door policy, it served me well. I did wonder whether it could have been putting myself open to be actually, you know, have a few more like attacks at what I was doing, but it's gone the other way. And so I'm really pleased with that. So yeah, just reflecting what you've all said.
Daniela, can I add one more thing? I think women know it takes a village, right? It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, childcare, family responsibilities. We innately seem to know that it takes a village. So the very best examples of women leaders I've seen are those who form the best teams, because we know you can't do it on your own. Whereas you will see other leaders go and think, you know, they know it all, they don't delegate, they don't share knowledge, they knowledge hide. Whereas when you look at, if you were all at this moment, if we had an activity and we said, right, think about the woman leader that you admire most, and then you thought about the people that she surrounds herself with, she would have a really supportive team of people that she trusts and that trust and respect her. And I think that's what makes women really good leaders as well, is that they get the village analogy.
Beautiful. Yes, go for it, Catherine.
I mean, again, just really quickly, that was a kind of position that I acknowledged within a previous leader, and actually said to me, you can't do this yourself. And it was noticing that and actually bringing that female perspective to what was a very kind of isolated leader at that point in time. It's exactly what has kind of changed the way in which we can manage the department. So yeah, I'd completely agree.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Kate, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up, so go for it.
I've been sort of like jotting down a million questions all together, so I'm not sure whether this is going to come out coherently. So I guess on one side, I mean, we're all women in here and we're on a female leadership course. We've talked a little bit about mansplaining and I guess maybe, sort of like gender equality. But then on the other side of the spectrum, I think, you know, we've probably all experienced mansplaining or maybe feeling like men are talking to us differently in the workplace. But then there's the other side of the spectrum, which I think comes forward around feeling like women aren't supporting other women in the workplace. And I guess one of my first questions is whether you've experienced actually feeling held back by women. And actually, is it time maybe to remove the gender associations? Because actually it's just good leadership all round in that both men and women hold people back and don't allow others to progress maybe beneath you, and just bringing your authentic self to the table. And I guess then maybe the second question would be, how would you treat men and women differently as leaders and managers at all, in trying to, I guess, be flexible and meet your audience at all? So yeah, I'll leave it there, else I could ask a million more.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Who would like to take the question from our panelists?
I work with the most fantastic male colleagues. Absolutely. I am fully supported by them and I fully support them because we are colleagues. The thing, so yes, you're right, in one sense we shouldn't have to genderize anything. The problem is that if you look at some of the data in terms of how women are in the workplace generally, you know, when you look at the data, we take our time to go through promotions because we don't feel we're ready. If you look at the COVID data, you see women are the people on the whole who have struggled to progress their careers because they're the ones that have been left holding the baby, literally. Mm. So whilst I totally accept that we shouldn't have to, I think we're still not in a position yet where there's that balance that we could just let it go. So I think the support that we need for women, from other women, but also from men, but that support to get that different way of thinking is still needed. And so yes, accept it, but don't think we're there yet.
I agree 100% with Karen, and that's why there's still a way to go. One of the ways that I've got around it in my current roles is to talk about it as a people issue. Because for those men who aren't yet on board, and I'm same as Karen, have some absolutely fantastic male colleagues, I've got some who need a little bit of education, and it is unfortunately on us to educate them. And one of those ways is to talk about it as a people issue, because as soon as you start bringing gender in, they're the ones who say, not my problem, I'm really great, I do X, Y, and Z, I wash the dishes at night at home, you know, all of that kind of BS. If you make it a people issue, they can then see how it impacts them. And I found that I get a much better results and input, and we've got a lot better responsibility taking across all roles in the department when it becomes a people issue.
Yeah, they're really interesting questions, and I kind of agree with everything that everybody said so far. But I think one of the things I have found is that within my department, some of the most difficult management issues or personal issues have been women not supporting women, and actually sort of chipping away and doing a little bit of undermining there, and calling that out and dealing with that is actually quite difficult. I don't see a difference again in my school between the male and female approach to leadership and management. There are good and bad potential and leaders in both groups, but I do find it quite interesting sometimes the way that as women we don't always support one another.
Thank you, Carol. Mary, you've been waiting with the hand up, so take us through your next question.
Thank you. Just building on some of the insights you've been giving us, I was wondering, especially in terms of the discussion around the sort of openness and to an extent authenticity and maybe making ourselves vulnerable through the styles, is how you have worked with boundaries and sort of managing the burden of the emotional labor burden that comes with leadership, both of men and women and of people of all different levels, especially through crisis, and how you sort of restore yourself and protect yourself at times, both in terms of the up and the down. Because I think often, especially as heads of school or as heads of department, you're caught in between, aren't you? And you're being pulled in both directions.
Great question. How do you deal with boundaries, and especially how do you protect yourself emotionally from all of the pressures? Thank you, Mary, for the question. Go for it, Catherine. I can see you're ready.
I can have a go. I try to keep when I'm working upwards, because it's often a very, very different environment, the kind of emotion out of it. So I've recently been making a lot of advocating a lot for more resource. And to be honest, when I see my staff very much under pressure, it does become quite kind of emotional in that sense. But I've got to do it in the way I was talking about before, in terms of stats, making a case, turning it into a positive and presenting solutions. And that's the way up. Working downwards, in terms of supporting my staff, again, I actually feel that when a colleague has a crisis, this is when I feel I'm doing the most to help them. And I don't feel that I'm emotional in terms of anything in meetings, but when a colleague is going through something, I do have quite an emotive response. And I don't think that's a weakness, really. I've been known to kind of, when they're having, people have, so many ongoing difficulties in so many ways with their families. And when I'm talking to them about it and also kind of emoting with them, I don't see that they think that's odd. You might think that they're saying, oh, is that someone who's, is she all right? They don't seem to respond to me in that way. They seem to actually appreciate the emotion that comes into that particular interaction, which to them is extremely difficult. And I think they like to be both supported and for their issues to be appreciated in that way. So I would never see that as a weakness. But yeah, cheers.
Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else? Boundaries? Yes, Karen.
So there's a psychologist at University of Leeds who's written a book called Being a Person at Work, and you are always a person at work. You have your emotional self at work, and you're not necessarily always going to show it, but you have to accept that you can't put things aside. So if you've come in having had a row with somebody or you've hurt yourself or something, you're still going to have that emotion with you when you're at work, and then you have to absorb the emotion of something that's happening at work as well. And I think therefore you begin to accept that you can't switch off different sides. You do get more resilience the more that you do these jobs, and that absolutely helps, has been indicated by Catherine. But I think it also helps to have the right people around you, so that you have the opportunity not to take it home, but to go and talk to somebody, whether it be a mentor. You can have a group around you as well, that you use a lot, and a good team or an individual. It's really important that you have that moment to share how you're feeling with somebody that you trust, because sometimes, when you're faced with some really significant issues, it does have take an emotional toll, and that's good. But it's not good if you absorb it and not have the opportunity to let it out. So my advice would always be to get those people around you that you trust to talk to.
Yeah, I think that having that ability to talk things out with somebody is really, really important. And I deal with a lot of my issues in that way, just talking and getting rid of them by talking. I also find it's helpful to develop an ability to box things off, to compartmentalize things, and to try and kind of make a quick decision on what you're going to accept and what you're going to fight, and to leave what you're going to accept, just to put it to one side and say, well, that's a battle I didn't win. I'll save that for another day. and to really focus on the things that you can deal with.
Beautiful. I'm mindful about time, and actually Nikki has a really beautiful question that we can finish off on. Thank you, Nikki, for the question in the chat. And her question is, perhaps in one word or a very short answer from each of the panel members, what motivates you to keep going? Who wants to go first?
I've asked that from the perspective of when you really want to give up. So
especially when you want to give up. Thank you, Nikki. Let's go to each of our panelists. Carol, I can see you already. Go for it.
Did you say Carol?
Yes.
I don't think I've ever really wanted to give up. I'm motivated by successes, and I'm motivated by solving problems. So solving problems and the successes that come out of them motivate me. But my successes are the successes of the people that I manage. So that's where I gain my motivation from seeing people that I manage go on and flourish and achieve in whatever area that they want to. And I kind of measure that by the way they come through my door, their willingness to come through the door and to talk and to explain this is the way they want to go, and having the capacity and to an extent the power to be able to enable that is what motivates me.
How beautiful. Other people's successes give you that motivation to actually carry on and seeing the impact that you have. That's lovely. Who else wants to take the question? What motivates you, especially when the going gets tough? Go, Catherine.
Yeah, I'll have a look. It's very, very similar, actually. It's sort of seeing, I mean, on a daily basis, you're making so many small decisions, and every now and again, there's some bigger ones. And it's when you see someone who could either, it's two ways, when you see someone who's really struggling and you can do something for them that then sets them on a path that's more effective for them. Or the other one is where you sort of see someone and see all the potential in them, and you have that conversation and they actually listen and develop in a certain way, and they absolutely rock it through. And you're thinking, actually, you know, I've changed, oh God, it sounds a bit big, but you know, I've helped people make decisions that have changed their lives for the better. And then when you see that, it's fantastic. I'm not saying I have probably put people in roles that weren't suited for them, but when it works, as it quite often does, it's an unbelievable joy and a privilege just to see that happen. So yes, I mean, also, to be honest, the students, but that's a whole different thing. But yeah, they do all the students. Yeah.
But you have those days, don't you, where you're like you say, Nikki, that's it, you've had enough. I'm not doing this job anymore. I can't stand it. I'm not taking this abuse anymore. Blah. And then you walk out your office and I'll bump into Natty, because her office is round the corner from me, and she'll tell me something that's just happened in the group. And you go, oh, that's really good. And so just got a grant, and they're just, oh, it's brilliant. You know, fantastic. And then you walk off down the corridor because you're still a bit cross, and I'll bump into Liz and she'll tell me something. And that's the best way. Get out of your office, go and have a walk, talk to people, get their energy, and by the time you get back to your office with your cup of tea, you're actually in a different mood. And students like Capital Shoots are good for that as well, because they talk about all sorts of things that you just didn't even know about, you know. So they can talk. That somebody was talking to me about some app the other day that I'd had absolutely no idea about, that sounded brilliant. And so those are the things that keep you sane. So that would be my advice, because you can't stop the leadership things going on. That's the wheel, isn't it? It just goes on and on and on. So take yourself off the wheel for a minute and go and do something else.
I mean, I think we all entered academia because we wanted to help develop new knowledge that would take better care and make society a better place. And that's what I think keeps you going when you're in these positions, is that you know you're making a difference and you're helping others to make a difference, whether it's giving research teams the space to go and develop a new COVID vaccine or do whatever. So it's about providing that support to ultimately make the world a better place. And I know that sounds very, you know, altruistic and big thinking, but I don't think any of us entered academia to make the world a worse place. But if you want to move into senior management, and that being in a position where you can make those things happen, it is a lot of responsibility. With that comes power, just like Spider-Man or whoever it was that said. But being able to do it consistently, as Karen said, means self-care. And Susan asked a question, and I've put it, at times, just turn email off for 24 hours. and take it off your phone so that it's not right there when you see the email come through, and go for that walk or cook your family a meal. You are entitled to time off as well. And I think that was a really key message that I got given by my mentor. You know, she went through a terrible divorce, and she was really worried about whether she should go on an online dating app, because in a position of senior management, what if students saw it, all the rest of it. And someone else said, but you're entitled to a private life as well. You know, you're entitled to a personal life. And so it's about finding that balance and making sure that you just take some time for yourself, whatever that might be: dancing, upholstery, cooking. Go and do it.
So beautiful. And perhaps last, and this can be in a word or two, one thing that you wished you had known before you got to this stage in your career. What one thing that, or advice that you think you would have made a difference to your journey? What would that be? One last tip.
Daniela, sorry, can you repeat the question?
One thing that you think would have made a big difference to you, one last tip that you might have for the group, and one thing that maybe would have helped you.
I think getting the balance right, understanding the balance. You're forever pushing and pushing, and you feel under pressure. But actually, it's okay. Like Susan just said, it's okay to take some time and stop for a bit, and to just breathe the air and go and do nothing, because that's often where, whilst you're not thinking, things actually happening, and you get those ideas. So that I wish I'd have known that and done more of that throughout my time.
Beautiful, thank you. Catherine?
I just say to take advice, take a step back, sort of self-reflect, and then also realize why you probably will have to do a lot of hard work. It's about you and your own development as well, and where you see yourself going. So just take a step every now and again to think, where am I? What do I actually want? What is there a strategy here at all? I'd say that.
Beautiful.
I think for me, if I'm honest, it would probably be about knowing how good I could be in the job. I think I've been good in the job, and I didn't know at the start that I could be that good. And so there were all those insecurities that you have at the very beginning. And if I'd been able to set them aside more quickly, I think I could have achieved even more.
Thank you, Carol. And Susan?
I think trusting my intuition more, my gut instinct, and going with that more than trying to overthink things, but in that, thinking about you personally, and how if your body's telling you that something's not right or you're not feeling right, go and look into it. A very personal anecdote, but I don't think we talk about this enough, particularly given the age that we are when we enter senior management. I knew something wasn't right and I couldn't put my finger on it, and I went to my GP, and I'm now on HRT. I'd started menopause early. It is a bitch. And just, if you're not feeling right, go to your GP, look after yourself, listen to your body, listen to what it's saying. I'm a much better leader now that I'm on HRT.
Thank you so much for bringing us so many different perspectives. I really love the way that you brought together not only some of the how you can navigate some of the complexities of working in higher education, but also how you brought your own stories. So can we please give a round of applause to our panel members today? And also, can we please put in the chat one thing that you've appreciated from our panelists today, just so that they have a bit of feedback from what has landed from their own stories. So if you want to put it in the chat, and what I can do is actually share it with our panel members, just so they know actually what have you appreciated for the fact they've given their time, their personal journeys, their personal stories. And one thing that I've definitely taken away from your insights is how we actually really do need female leaders. We have strengths and skills and capabilities and abilities that are absolutely needed. And that is such a powerful message. So wherever you are, remember that there are at least, there are about 24 people here who have started, or they are doing this every single day. So thank you to the 4 panelists for showing us that this is possible. And thank you for sharing that. I hope you can see Catherine and Karen and Susan and Carol, some of the beautiful feedback that you have in the chat. Thank you for being so honest and visible female leaders. What a beautiful way to say thank you. And real world examples and solutions. Also, thank you for showing us the creativity in leadership and how you navigate up and down, getting people on board. Thank you for your openness and transformative perspectives. This is wonderful. Whew, well, this was really, really deep. So thank you so much for all of your stories that you've shared. Thank you for